Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakahakwadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure unto the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'll be profiling a couple of minutes of this video from the CJ Wellerman Show's YouTube channel titled, Israel Prepares for Doomed War Against Turkey. And hey, another clear-cut example of biblical prophecy, and that we are quickly approaching the end of this age of the Gentiles, the heathens, chiefly the rulership of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, which those people over in the Holy Land right now are Edomites of the tribe of Amalek. Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is about to bring these nations against you and against the United States of America in the climactic battle of World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon in Joel chapter 3. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Hello, I'm CJ Wellerman, and in this episode we reveal how Turkey is on the verge of unleashing hell against the Zionist state of Israel. But first, please remember to like and subscribe to our show. Now let's get into it. During the past week, a major news development was deliberately ignored by the Western media, for the simple reason it speaks to Israel's growing weakness in the Middle East. And the word weakness can't be emphasized enough here, given the Zionist-controlled media wants you to believe the opposite is true. That Israel is growing stronger, having completely destroyed Gaza, having pulverized Hezbollah, and having totally neutered the Iranian regime. But this perception of Israeli strength and dominance is nothing more than a carefully manufactured illusion. And you don't need to take my word for it. Instead, focus your attention on the actions of the Israeli government, which convened an extraordinary security consultation on March 25th. Over fears that Turkey is mobilizing its forces to confront the Zionist state, and soon. These growing Israeli fears and tears come on the back of a report produced by an Israeli government panel on January 7, which concluded that Turkey now represents a bigger threat than Iran. The report cites Israel's growing concerns towards the new Syrian government, which it fears will inspire, unify, and mobilize Islamist forces and factions throughout the Middle East. These fears are exponentially heightened by the presence of Turkish forces in Syria, with Israeli security officials worried the Arab nation will become a Turkish proxy and an essential part of Turkey's ambition to restore the Ottoman Empire to its former glory. Well, on March 24th, Israel's worst nightmare came to fruition when the new Syrian government granted Turkey a sovereign military base in Palmyra, which will be as large as the United States Air Base in Ramstein, Germany, making Turkey's future air base in Syria the largest military air base in the entire world. Also, Turkey has agreed to train and arm the Syrian army, saying that any attack against its forces or assets will be met with overwhelming force. A threat that carries a big punch, given we are talking about the strongest military in the Middle East, parking itself on Syrian soil and along Israel's border.
Another day, another foreign leader threatening Israel.
We need to be very strong so that Israel cannot do these ridiculous things to Palestine. Just as we entered Karabakh, just as we entered Libya, we can do something similar to them.
These headlines speak to Israel's growing fears and paranoia towards Turkey's growing foothold in neighboring Syria. The Times of Israel says Turkey must be stopped, as other Zionist outlets hype up the jihadist threat in Syria, while some encourage Israel to build an alliance with Kurdish forces. On Sunday, the Israeli newspaper Ynet News said, Turkey is not Iran, neither in isolation, economy, or influence. It is a dynamic regional power with one foot in the West, major leverage over Europe, and a growing strategic footprint across the East. Make no mistake, this is Israel watching the walls close in. And for this reason, the Israeli military has told Netanyahu to prepare for war against the Muslim superpower.
In Israel, a government commission headed by former Security Council Chief Jacob Nagel has released a report on the defense budget and security strategy. It says the country needs to prepare for a possible future confrontation with Turkey. The Jerusalem Post writes about this. The document mentions the rise to power of pro-Turkish forces in Syria. It is noted that the unification of groups loyal to Ankara in that country poses a threat to Israel's national security.
Israel has become a victim of its own arrogance and hubris, and like a drunk sailor, blindly swinging punches in a dark alleyway, it has fooled itself into believing it can fight and beat anyone, anywhere, at any time. But it's one thing to murder defenseless women and children in Gaza and Lebanon, and it's another thing altogether when confronting a genuine military heavyweight, such as Turkey.
Hey, in the famous words of Richard Medhurst, hey, it's easy when you're fighting women and children, but you have problems when you got to fight against real men. As we can clearly see, you can't believe the hype out there. The 1948ers, hey, they're struggling out here, and as C.J. Wellerman said, they believe their own hype, and their pride and their hubris swinging in every direction, thinking that they can take anybody out. And ultimately, why is that? Because they know that they have the support of the United States of America, which, the 1948ers are going to eventually do something which is going to drag, the U.S. into that regional war and to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Joel 49 verse 20, the least of the flock, those Amalekite Edomites, shall draw them out. The U.S. and NATO in on the side of the 1948ers, though with NATO, that's not going to last too long. You can see how these Western nations are turning against the state of Israel. And hey, Turkey is a member of NATO. And then, it's going to draw out on the side of Iran, Russia, China, and these other major nations.
Which possesses the 8th strongest army on the planet, a full 9 places above Israel. I mean, even Egypt ranks above the Zionist state in terms of military power. However, any conversation that compares...
Let's see with that clip. But hey, Turkey will come against the state of Israel, and it's a major part of biblical prophecy. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1, and the header reads, prophesy about Gog and the future invasion of Israel. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, which is the biblical name for Russia. And just recently, Putin warned Trump in the U.S. that there would be major consequences, if they do those strikes against Iran. The chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And just because, the Most High is going to use Gog or Russia to come against Israel and the U.S., that doesn't mean that the Most High is on the side of Russia. He's going to use you, then abuse you, just like what the Most High did and is doing with the United States of America. America, or Babylon the Great, was used to fulfill prophecy, and now that it and Esau are coming to the end of their usefulness, and the Most High is going to throw you out like like Chinese leftovers. Verse 4, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And that's the Most High putting these Russian Edomites in that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit, which we can clearly see with their war in Ukraine. And it seems like threats every other couple of weeks of using nuclear weapons against the West. And I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Russia's military might being brought forth into the valley of Jehoshaphat in the so-called Middle East, really Western Asia. Verse 5, Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Now it's going into Gog, or Russia's allies, which, either economically or militarily, Russia has some dealings with Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya. Now here's the main point I wanted to get to. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey and all his bands, and the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. And remember what C.J. Wellerman just said. Turkey has the 8th largest army in the world. And Turkey is a member of NATO right now. But as we can see, according to biblical prophecy, they're about to fully ally themselves with the East. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Gog is going to be a guard unto these smaller nations, and these smaller nations are what? Going to be gathered unto Gog and prepared with them. Verse 8, after many days thou shalt be visited, and this is speaking of the land of Israel. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and it is gathered out of many people. Speaking of you Amalekite Edomites, mainly coming from Eastern and Central Europe, gathered into the Holy Land, which was brought back, from the sword. And how was that land given into their possession? Through set the groundwork with the Balfour Declaration, and then later UN and US, resolutions and treaties. And you had the Israeli Declaration of Independence. And then immediately what happened? The Arab-Israeli War, the 6 Days War. Fast forward to today with this war in Gaza, how they've gotten, more and more Palestinian territory by the sword against the mountains of Israel. And, mountains can be symbolic for governments. So what? Governments of the 1948ers, which have been always waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. And those 1948ers have been dwelling very safely for the last couple of decades due to what? Help from the U.S. mainly, and then the West. But with these 1948ers' recent war in Gaza, and, their campaign against the so-called Palestinian Arabs who are Ishmaelites, the world is quickly turning against them. Netanyahu has had a warrant out for his arrest from I believe it's the International Criminal Court. And then you've had these different global organizations say that 1948 occupation of Palestinian land is illegal. Verse 9, thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, Gog and everyone that is gathered unto thee. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, including Gomer, or Turkey, and many people with thee. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, it shall also come to pass that at that time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought, to fully come against, those 1948ers in the land of Israel. Because right now, you've seen Russia holding a lot of restraint in that region, and especially with the West and their provocations, in Eastern Europe. But when the time comes for the Most High to flip that switch, Russia's going to be all green lights go. And also, Russia's going to have an evil eye towards the United States of America in shooting nuclear missiles onto her. Verse 11, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, and I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. because, like I just said, those 1948ers have thought themselves, safe and have been pretty safe for the last couple of decades due to what? Help from the U.S. and all their anti-missile, defense systems and, just their missile defense systems in general. But as we've seen recently, with Iran's two, first ever strikes onto the land of Israel, hey, they're not dwelling so safely or carelessly anymore. They can be touched, and they will be touched. Verse 12, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited with those bastards. As I think it's in the book of Amos, it says, and a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod, speaking of you Amalekite Edomites, you Idumeans who have appointed that land into your possession, as pursuant to Ezekiel 36 verse 5. You and everybody else in there, including those Palestinians, are about to get evicted. And upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, that dwell in the midst of the land, all this aid that they receive, mainly from the United States of America, you've got Amalekites over there that are in their teens and their 20s that are still receiving money for things that happened, in quotes, to their foreparents during the 1940s with the Austrian painter. So, again, as we can clearly see, biblical prophecy continues to take place right before our very eyes, and it's only going to ramp up. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere, Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.